Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a centralized platform for athletes and other alumni to network and connect with each other, as well as tap into various resources for business services, financial, mental health. This show is all about athletes transition out of sports. It's such a major issue today, whether it's from a financial literacy standpoint, a mental health standpoint. So each week we interview former college and professional athletes and we talk about their transition out of sports into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. So excited to have today. We've talked many times and talked about probably being on the podcast before, but now we finally got her. Natalie Hummel, how you doing today, Natalie?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
It's a pleasure. So Natalie was a volleyball player at college at Colorado State. And then once she got done with that, when she transitioned out of sports, she got into a few different fields. She was in IT consulting. Ultimately, she got into sales for many years. And then just kind of decided, let me go the route of nonprofit. And she was the founder of Every Kid Sports and had a very successful long-term career there. And today she's doing some business development, which we'll hear more about. So Natalie, I always like to talk about playing sports growing up and how that shaped you leading up into college.
As I was an athlete from super young, I was always out in the neighborhood, kicking the ball, throwing the ball, playing handball against the fence. Anything I could do that was sports related, I was all in. I was born in the early 60s, and there weren't as many organized sports for girls in particular. So I was a tomboy. So I actually joined Little League and pretended I was a boy so I could play. and then, girl sports started to come a little bit more in the 70s. And so I played every sport I could. And for me, it was just such a positive outlet. It was a place for me to make friends. It was a place for me to get my energy out. It was a place for me to, develop all kinds of skills. And I can't even imagine where I would be right now without youth sports and all the opportunities I had.
Yeah, and I'm sure that kind of played into the future you, which we'll talk about as far as your nonprofit organization. But yeah, it's I've had the same conversation. A couple other folks that were, in the same age range as us. And, one of my other podcast guests, she talked about that. She was a softball player, but same kind of thing. It wasn't, she was on the cuspidus of it starting up and then, getting to play ultimately in college when they started having that as a college sport. So let's talk about, I mentioned the whole idea with this podcast is the transition out of sports, and it's very difficult. When you were at Colorado State, were there any programs related to kind of life after sports? And I'm not just talking about like a one-day workshop, more so like curriculum. And if not, then do you know of any today there?
Yeah, there was nothing. And in fact, most of my, teammates that I was playing sports with were PE majors or things like that. And they were just all about sports, and they weren't really even thinking about like, what am I going to do after sports? I happened to study finance and computer science, and, was always interested in business. So I kind of, had a broader degree, but there was really,
Yeah. And I think that was
and as far as what they,
no, go ahead. Yeah. What they're
sorry.
doing today.
Yeah, I was just going to say today, I think there's more. There definitely, I've had more emails from my college reaching out as an alumni to connect with the current athletes than I've ever had in the past. And they have somebody now who actually is working on creating connection opportunities and networking and things like that. So I was really encouraged to see that.
No, that's great. And it's, when I see that kind of thing from schools, and we'll get into that a little bit, talking about like mentoring and things like that. But yeah, it's important to do that. And I think with the, transition out of sports, every school is different. Some schools are getting better with it. I think it's just, it's an area where, like you said, the athletes are so focused on their sport, not really thinking about what's next. And when I've talked to other podcast guests as well, they've kind of said that they really wish there was like a 4-week mandatory workshop or some type of a class they had to take during a semester that would have helped them in the future. Because I think the other thing too is there's not only the current athletes, but they're kind of underserved when you look on the other side of the alumni. I mean, that's one of the things that we've talked about doing is we've got a lot of great resource partners is trying to maybe go into some of these schools and help them develop additional curriculum or workshops to help not only the current students, but also the alumni athletes as well.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a huge gap there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it sounds like Colorado State is making an effort now, which is good. I mean, it's glad to see that. And like I said, some of these other schools. So you kind of hit on it. So I'll kind of talk about the alumni engagement, which obviously at Alumni Direct, that's
Yeah.
important to us. So you said it wasn't, was it really going on when you were there? Were there any kind of, I guess the athletic department looking to bring back athletes across the different sports?
Not when I was there. And when I graduated, there was really very little engagement at all from the school with the athletes, and the coach never really reached out. We had a couple players go on to play on the Olympic team, and even with all of that, there was really no engagement with our class. And then one of the players that went on to play on the Olympic team got inducted into the Hall of Fame. She was the first female athlete inducted to the Hall of Fame at CSU. And even with that induction, like they didn't even reach out to us and let us know. I found out about it, months later on Facebook when she posted about it. So
Wow, that's a shame. I mean, that's something to celebrate. It's too bad that they didn't do more. But you said today they're kind of making more of a concerted effort to start reaching back out to the alumni athletes.
yes, all of us. Yeah, it's been great. I've reconnected with almost my entire team, which I'd lost touch with a lot of them, and it's been really fun. We actually did a little reunion. I think that was about, I can't remember. It was quite a while ago. But yeah, it was really great. We all got together for my class and the team that I played on when we were the first team to be nationally ranked at CSU, and they've had a long history since then. But we were the first team to be nationally ranked, and so that team got together and it was really fun. But yeah, they haven't done a great job historically.
Yeah, that's great. That's fine. I recently I ran cross country and track in college, but from my high school was where I had meaningful relationships and all that. And it was I was back up in New Jersey where I'm from, and we had a little get together with 4 or 5 of us. It was pretty cool just to go over those memories and all that. And I think it's important. It's a two-way street. Obviously, I mean the schools need to reach out, and the athletes need they want to do it as well. But I think it's something that they should do. I think alumni want to help. Like we had a situation where we were on a call with our athletic department from my school, and I had one of the guys on with me was the former was a Hall of Famer from the school, football player, and then also played about 10 years in the NFL. And both of us said, tap us in. We're willing to help. So I think it's just something that um, more schools need to do is try to reach out to their alumni because I think they help. And then you talked about the volleyball team getting together. Are you seeing it? Are they doing it for other sports as well? Like, or that was more just kind of geared towards from what you're seeing?
I'm pretty sure it was. I I know the football team has done it for decades.
I'm sure.
Um, but yeah, this particular event was organized by the our old coach actually was back in Fort Collins he was coming back to do some leadership training for student athletes, and he reached out to all of us and invited us all back. Um, and so, but yeah, I can't. I know the football team, and I know some of the other men's sports have been doing it. But as far as across the board for athletes, my guess is no.
Right. Right. Okay. And then, so let's kind of switch gears and talk about networking, connecting. Obviously, that's how we've met. Talk about the
Mm-hmm.
importance of that, and then even the importance while you're still playing.
Yeah, I think it's so important to build your network. It's one of the things I did, early on when I was still playing and it was in college. I was building networks both with my college professors, but also with um, different the parents of some of the students that were on the team with me. I would get to know their parents, and especially, dad owned a business or worked for a big company and stuff, and I think that's so important. And today it's easier than ever, right? You can create a LinkedIn profile when you're still in college and start connecting with people. I would say some of my biggest opportunities that I've had in my career and with Every Kid Sports, a nonprofit I started, some of the biggest dollars that I've brought in is through relationships I had on LinkedIn and through connections there. And so I think it's super important. And I call it a network of help. And it's like a whole collection of people that are in different domains of your life. So it's not all business. It could be people that are good parents. It could be people that are have happy marriages that you can, talk to about, like, how do they keep their marriage happy? It could be people that know about traveling internationally. And yeah, it's that whole set of people that you need to have in your life to make it easier to transition, to move from career to career, and to also handle other challenges that come up in your life.
Yeah, that's great. Everything you said there, that's like obviously like textbook networking connecting. I'm so glad you brought up about, the other students and their parents and all, because I talk about that a lot. Is that, while you're playing, especially, you're even in high school too, like just building those relationships that, you just brought up, that you never know who these people are, where they're going to be, and how they might be able to help. And from that same token is, I always talk about, approaching networking with that kind of pay it forward attitude, which I know you have, where
Yeah.
it's just, how can I help you? And so I think as you, develop these relationships, I always, relate some different stories. Sometimes people think, oh, well, that person's like a millionaire, billionaire, whatever. Well, how could I help them? And maybe you can, maybe it's like maybe they have kids and there's something that you could do to help their kids. Maybe it's getting into school or whatever. I mean, there's things that you do. So I think if you kind of take that helping attitude, I mean, give your thoughts on that, just kind of your approach of connecting with people.
Oh, absolutely. I call it building obligation. And so, if you can build obligation with someone, and sometimes it seems silly, like, I mean, he could pay anybody to do that, but like you said, one guy in particular that I befriended was a guy in our neighborhood growing up, and he was, owned multiple businesses, very successful guy. And I, started off babysitting their kids, and then when I turned 16, I would shuttle them to camp and pick them up from camp and things. And his wife was sick, and I don't even know what she had, but I know she was sick and struggling, and he was paying all these nannies and all these different people and stuff, and I was just like that. I was on call for him, and he wrote me unbelievable letters of references. He's been somebody that I've relied on throughout my life to help me in different ways. And so even if you feel like you have no power, there's ways that you can build obligation just by being helpful, being making them offers. Sometimes it was silly things like, picking up the mail, or, I'm going to the dry cleaners. Do you have something there? And just very simple things that I did for that family. And I wasn't doing it to get something from him. I was doing it because they were really nice. And he was always so nice to me that I was kind of doing it to pay him back the way he was nice to me. But then he was like, when it came time for me to get a letter of recommendation, he was like, oh my God, absolutely. I'll write one.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think people are afraid to tap into it too. It's just whether they don't know how to do it. And that's something that we encourage and that we're trying to help. So I'm glad you brought all that up. Let's, I'm gonna throw a couple quick questions at you. I always like to, this has been
Sure.
it's not even a new wrinkle anymore, because I've probably done about 20, 30 different shows now or whatever. But what advice would you give to freshman Natalie in college?
Oh, wow. I guess the biggest advice I would give to myself back then was to stay centered in the long term vision that you have for your life and not get so wrapped up in the short term thing that you're doing right then. I know I sacrificed a lot to play volleyball and did a lot of things that, looking back now, I go, oh, the trade off for that probably um, wasn't worth it. And I think it's so easy, especially for college athletes, to get sucked into a program and to do everything that's asked of them for the sport without much long-term return for it. Where if you spend a little bit more time on your grades and on learning and on networking and things like that, you'd probably get a bigger return than giving 100% to your sport.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then fast forward to senior year, what advice would you give to senior Natalie?
Well, I kind of laugh. I would start looking for a job fast earlier in my senior year. I kind of waited until I felt like I want to graduate and I want to have that summer off. And I really should have taken my whole senior year to try and find a job. I did graduate in the midst of a recession, and that made it really tough to find a job. But I did have a lot of classmates that did get the handful of jobs that were available, but they started like, first semester senior year. So if you're a senior in college, don't wait till you graduate. Don't think like, oh, I want to have the summer off. That can be really detrimental to, yeah, the early bird does get the worm.
For sure. It's interesting. Do you think that any of that had to do with just being an athlete and so focused on your sport? Because it just seems sometimes that when you talk to some of these athletes they are so ingrained in every day the practice and everything that goes into being an athlete, they just don't have the time to think about that. I mean, do you think that might have played into it a little bit?
For sure. For sure. I also had fatigue where I was, yeah, I was really tired of just the grind,
Yeah.
and so I didn't have any additional capacity. And yeah, it was, yeah, I just felt like I needed a break, which, sports became year round, and you don't really get the chance to have time off. And so by that time in my senior year, it was all I could do to keep getting my grades and and play and stay in shape and all the things that needed to be done.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is back then, and I was schooling the same kind of time frame. You as an athlete, especially like some of these major schools, you didn't really have an opportunity to do any kind of internships and things like that. So maybe that probably plays into it as well, because maybe if the athletes had that opportunity, because like when I'm even now, like when we talk to some of these athletes in these athletic departments, they're just not getting that opportunity. And then so when it comes time to getting a job and looking at careers, it becomes more of a challenge. A lot of their not teammates, a lot of their fellow classmates are ahead of them that weren't athletes because they've gone through and done the internships or co-ops or where they might have done.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
So one, this is I haven't talked about it on the show in a while, but it just kind of came up today. Um, talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about NIL, name, image, likeness. And when we were, back when we played in sports, it wasn't around. And had I do another podcast I was telling you called NIL for You, and we had a guest on today who's a former softball player in college, recent graduate, and we were just talking about kind of the changes in the women's sports landscape and how it's getting more attention, with NIL and the opportunities that maybe weren't there before that are starting to come up. So talk a little bit about your thoughts on that, maybe positive and negative from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great in many aspects that some of these athletes can make money, while they're in college, and especially some of these athletes that are coming from low income homes, and them going off to play a sport is really impacting their family. A lot of them were one of the breadwinners, or one of the ones that were making money in the family to help the family. And then they go off to college and, get a full-time job. And yes, their college is paid for, which is awesome. But the family at home is, being impacted because they don't have that income from that, particular athlete coming in. And so I do think that there's some really good things from it. I think that there are, yeah, I don't know. I think there's some negatives as well, where some of these kids are being, the brands are greedy and,
Yeah.
just kind of like swarming these kids. And I just think it adds added pressure on them. And I feel like some of them are getting exploited a little bit. And yes, they are getting paid, but sometimes the brand deals aren't, all that favorable for the athlete. And, yeah, and there's some inequities in it for sure. So I think there's definitely maturing that needs to happen in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tricky. I think there's some good things, and I think there's some dangerous things in it as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the biggest, one of the biggest, I guess, negatives that I talk about a lot is just the lack of education, because there's just so many like you said, that, whether it's the brands being greedy or just these athletes not understanding that, hey, guess what, you're going to have to pay taxes, and maybe you should be setting up an
Mm-hmm.
LLC and just doing these different things. I mean, there's the learning curve there as well, that I think people need to look at. So let's talk about transition out of sports. So here you are, you played sports your whole life, you played volleyball all the way through college. Now all of a sudden it's time to, like, as people, quote unquote, like the real world. But how was your transition out of sports?
Yeah, it was difficult in one way and therapeutic in another way. So, when you get that pressure off of you of having to, stay in shape and compete, and just the demands on you, there's a breath that you can take, and like, oh, I'm glad that's over. But that's quickly followed by the letdown of it as well, and the lack of, like, okay, now what I've spent so much time working on this and getting to where I wanted to be in this, and to have it come to an end, it's kind of like, oh, who am I now? If you ask anybody that knew me in high school and they say, oh, tell me about Nat, oh, she's an athlete, and she's really smart, she's an athlete, but it was athlete, athlete. And when I stopped playing, it was kind of like, oh, for a while I thought, oh, I'm not an athlete anymore. And it took me actually a long time, maybe 5 years, to go like, oh no, I'm still an athlete. I'm never not going to be an athlete. And it just looks different. And, I kept playing, I played doubles volleyball, and I played competitive softball. And, I had lots of other things that I still uh, stayed with, but I wasn't, a college athlete anymore. I wasn't on a Division I team, and it does kind of hit your self-esteem. And so I do think that one thing that helped me a lot, again, is some of these mentors I had me thinking long term about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to define myself. And doing a lot of that work really helped me change my narrative about who I was, and that, no, I'm a business person. I'm an IT specialist. I'm a this, I'm a that. That was different than just holding my whole identity as an athlete.
And so give a couple words of advice to athletes as they look to transition out of sport, whether it's out of college, out of professional, even out of high school for that matter.
Yeah, I think it's so important to um, have a broader narrative of who you are, even when you're playing sports and you're at the top of your game, to be thinking of yourself not just as an athlete, but to be looking. And I know it's really hard, but to be looking 3, 5, 10 years out and go, well, okay, I'm not going to be able to play sports at this level. Oh, I mean, you might be able to, but the chances of that actually happening is so low that you need to be thinking about, what else do I want to be, so that you're working towards that simultaneously as being an athlete. And I think that was the one thing that probably helped me the most, is changing my narrative from being an athlete to being a business person, and to wanting that same success that I had on the court, to have that same success in business, and to put all my focus onto that. And, I went back and got an MBA, and part of that whole reason I did that was, again, I treated it just like sports, where it's like, okay, I'm going to get a different coach. I'm going to get different education. I'm going to train differently. And I think that's really important for athletes, is to not have their whole entire identity connected to sports.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And then I think you kind of touched on it a little bit there, but talk about the athlete skill set, the DNA of an athlete, and how that translates into the business world. Because again, obviously, getting into the IT consulting and the sales and all that, companies want to hire athletes. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you learn as an athlete is to overcome. And so, whether that's a loss, whether it's a bad pass in the middle of a game, whether it's you threw an interception, and you got to learn how to bounce back and how to recover. And that same skill set is so true in business and in life, and it's the ability to bounce back, and so resiliency, and then also just that striving to be better, to work on yourself, and to put the work in to improve yourself. And that that shows up for me so much in business. When I hire someone who's played sports and kind of has that mindset, it's like it just shows up because they want to learn, they want to improve. They make a mistake, they are just like it's not like devastating to them because they've had a lot of losses and made a lot of mistakes in a game, and they're able to just bounce back and learn and recover. There's so many things with it: leadership, communication, team spirit. There's just so many things that athletes just naturally have. But I would say resiliency is the thing that keeps showing up for myself in my own life, but also other athletes that I've hired.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's encouraging. One of the other podcasts we talked, this guy played football in college and he was done after that. And then he ultimately became a CEO of a couple big Fortune 500 companies. And he just implored athletes like, hey, it's not over, when you're done with your sport. You're not just Natalie, the volleyball player, Rob, the runner, Susie, the swimmer. You're a person that has another 30, 40, 50 years out there of just doing something for a new career change. So let's kind of move forward to you got into, you spent many years in business and then you decided to start Every Kid Sport. So talk a little about your mindset of kind of why you wanted to start that, and then, share with everybody, the foundation that you built.
Yeah. So I was, for many years before Every Kid Sports, I kept saying, man, I want to make a bigger impact. I just felt like the work I was doing was, adding value to my family and adding value to the companies that I was working at. But I just felt like I wanted to leave a bigger mark on the world. And I didn't know what that meant. I was kind of in this, just trying to discover what that meant. And I tried a lot of different things to try and scratch that itch, if you will. And kind of like, that's not exactly what I was looking for. And then I met John Ballantyne, who is one of the co-founders of Every Kid Sports, and he was talking about this vision of getting more kids playing and keeping them playing, and it just like I was just like it just lit a fire inside of me. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And we first started it as a social enterprise with a for-profit side and a nonprofit side. John and another gentleman, Brian Grossman, were focused on the for-profit side, and then Tara Ballantyne and myself were focused on the nonprofit side. And I started off just volunteering there, and then eventually we grew it in to what it was. The other founders had stepped away, and I was the only one left. But it just became something I was super passionate about. And the whole goal was to help more kids play sports, and especially focused on underserved, low-income kids, and getting them the same equal opportunity. Sports was such a gift to me in my life that when I learned that 65% of kids weren't playing, and that the number one reason they weren't playing sports is they couldn't afford it. And we're not talking club sports or travel sports. These are just good old recreational sports right in your neighborhood. And, so many of those low income kids, weren't playing at all. And so I wanted to change that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's sad that these kids can't play. And I mean, both we've been around, other nonprofits too that are in this space now and just trying to make an impact. I was talking to one guy fairly recently. They were doing a thing down by me in South Florida, big event it was kind of like a camp for underprivileged kids, just a sports camp. And, some, former professional athletes were there and just, trying to help out. So it's great to see that, to give back. And so, so after, you recently stepped down and decided you kind of maybe got a little bit of that, sales, business development bug back in you. So talk about what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I just recently started with NeuroGuard, and NeuroGuard Plus. It's a mouthpiece that goes on the lower teeth, and it's actually proven to prevent concussions. And on top of that, it also increases performance. It's really amazing technology. It's simple in a lot of ways, but it was created by a neuromuscular dentist. And what it does is it helps put the jaw in the correct alignment. And when you think about a concussion, what really causes the concussion is if you get hit on the head and if your jaw's locked up and not in the right position, the concussive forces stay in your cranium and your brain shakes around in there. And that's really what causes the concussion. If you get hit on the head and the impact is able to dissipate through your body, you're much less likely to get a concussion. And so this very simple appliance that you put in your mouth, get your jaw in that correct position. Now, the other thing that happens is it actually helps increase performance as well. You can breathe with it, you can talk with it, and it helps turn on your neural network. And so I'm just like, I'm super passionate about it. I think, concussions are a huge problem for kids playing sports, especially, we have more and more kids playing competitive sports. So the rates of concussion among our kids are, getting higher. And of course, we know more about concussions. I mean, when I was a kid, I probably had so many concussions that never got diagnosed because, it just wasn't what they did. It's like, you just like, oh, you just kind of, oh man, I kind of rung my bell, and you get back up and you just keep playing. Where today, we know a lot more. But yeah, this thing is pretty amazing. We've had some amazing testimonials from, a football team down in Texas that, they wore it for several years, had almost no concussions. Then one year they didn't wear it and they ended up with like 10 concussions on their team. And then the next year they went back to wearing it and they had 0 concussions. So it definitely prevents concussions. And the people that use it and wear it end up loving it.
So that's really great that it's affecting, reducing the state of concussion. And, I've seen some of those, testimonial videos of some of these coaches, which has been great success of, where they've had, and I know you were talking a little bit about that, where reducing from before they had it to, when they had it to even afterwards, when they weren't using it, going back up again. But I know there's other traits of the NeuroGuard that are very helpful when it comes to sport performance. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, that's the thing that's really cool about this is, it's great that it prevents concussions, but it also increases sports performance. And really it does that through the alignment of the jaw. So when the jaw is in the correct position, it kind of opens up the neural pathway. And what a lot of athletes, especially professional athletes that are really, in tune with their body, they actually say that they can feel a difference, that they feel more connected to the earth. And they with different teams that have been using it, they actually see that that their team can lift more weights, heavier weights. They have increased endurance. And that's one of the things is you can breathe really easily with this in. It kind of opens up your breathing to be more effective. You can talk with this in your mouth, so it's a pretty powerful mouth guard, and it's so inexpensive. I mean, for everything that you get from it, if you're a parent and you could think that for $45 you could help prevent concussions in your kid, I just don't know why every parent wouldn't buy one for their child.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the first of all, leaving aside the physical and the mental, the effects of it, but just even from the cost of the difference, if you did get a concussion, you had to go to the doctor, all you're more than going to spend a lot more than $45. And then, obviously it's all the issues that go along with it. And it sounds like something that can be really great. And that could help, a lot of kids, especially, but, obviously adults too, right? I mean, it's something that could be, utilized in all the major sports.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, even sports that you wouldn't think about, like, I mean, cheerleading has a really high concussion rate. And because, they're getting thrown up in the air and caught, and there's just all kinds of incidents. The other one that I'm really interested in is like downhill ski racing, mountain bike racing, and sports like that where, if they crash, they're getting hurt. And so if we can prevent concussions for them, that'd be really helpful. So, and then, on top of that, any increased performance that they could get from it would be helpful for them as well. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's something I'm super passionate about.
No, that's great. I mean, yeah, you think of a lot of sports that people wouldn't necessarily, even like people, I guess, like soccer, sometimes people wouldn't think about, but obviously, I mean, when you're heading the ball or, falling down, I mean, even like, cycling, I would think too, right? I mean, I guess they're wearing helmets, but like if something happened or they fell, and it's not, I guess it's not only the falling, it's kind of like what you just brought up that people probably don't think about, like the cheerleading. They might not fall, but I guess the fact that they're coming down, they're catching, it kind of jars their head in a certain position or neck, I guess is where that would come into play.
Yeah, there's a really high rate of concussions in cheerleading. And, most of them aren't going to want to wear an upper mouth guard because they can't talk and they can't cheer, but a lower one, they can still cheer and talk. And it's not as, obvious. They can smile and nobody really knows they have it in their mouth. And yeah, there's just, and even sports that you don't think about, like basketball, you can get an elbow in the face and different things. You can trip and fall and hit your head. And again, the increased performance makes it like, why wouldn't you wear it if it increased your endurance and your performance? So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tell people where they can find you.
so neuroguardplus.com. And we're actually got approval to be on Amazon, so you can actually find it on Amazon. But yeah, I'd love, like I said, every parent in the United States that have kids playing sports to know about it. I think it's a low-cost investment that can really help your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely encourage people to go out to NeuroGuard and reach out. And if people have questions for Natalie or across social media, this is like old school. We do www dot, and LinkedIn or X now. I mean, people still call it Twitter, but
Yeah. If you can find me, Natalie Hummel on LinkedIn. That's a great way to connect with me. And then, www.neuroguard, NEURAGUARD plus PLUS.com.
there you go. You got it. And you could find us at on our Alumni Direct on our YouTube channel. We're across all the different podcast networks, and this has been great, Natalie. It's so important. I think that we're really encouraging to try to get more and more athletes and people to view and listen to the podcast. There's so many great nuggets that you brought up today. Just different ideas and solutions for athletes transition out of sport. And I guess the key is that athletes need to know you're not in it alone, and there's a lot of people that want to help. So feel free to reach out. And it's another great show. So thank you again, Natalie.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Rob. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.